Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to the program. It is exactly 8:30 a.m. We're going to be joined by Seehaam Samaai, Director of the Women's Legal Center, to talk about the big news of the day as far as the Muslim community is concerned, and Alhamdulillah, even beyond the Muslim community. Shamshir has just retweeted me a message from a tweet from Professor Tuli Madonsela, and this is what she says: Muslim marriages to be fully recognized finally. Thanks, ConCourt, for coming through for Muslim women, while politics failed to move the needle. This is an unconscionably belated social justice development, but important nonetheless. And that was tweeted by Professor Tuli Madonsela. And let's open the show with that beautiful tweet and welcome you to the program, Seehaam Samaai, Director of Women's Legal Center. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the program, and you must be absolutely thrilled.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And yes, shukran again for having the Women's Legal Center. Yes, we are obviously elated. I have to admit, after 14 years, for some, it's just been an exceptionally long road. For some, even more than 25 years. And so but I also think that along with our partners who's been pioneering the legal recognition and protection of Muslim women over the past 25 years, um, has been a long road. And for Muslim women of South Africa, it is a victory to be able to be vindicated, or at least that the rights have been vindicated and recognized, and it's now being protected by the law. And so obviously there's a lot of implications, practical implications that needs to be done, um, because the and that there's also the interim relief, which needs to be spoken about because the provision in itself is out of community of property. However, to ensure that there's equity in terms of the division, Section 7.3 can be used. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done on the part of the state to ensure that the judgment aligns with the policies as well as um, implementing instruments of the department.
Okay, here's two important questions I do need to ask you. We need clarity on this. The first one being the state. Obviously, in one of the reports that I've come across, the state is concerned that there will be chaos if interim relief is extended to marriages that have already been dissolved, either through death or divorce. So, what happens in that situation? And the other very important question is, Alhamdulillah, as Muslims, we enter into a nikah, and a lot of us, the vast majority of Muslims, obviously, once the person passes on, we go into, we go into a Muslim wills. We have our nikahs on the one side, and then also a Sharia compliant will. How does this then play into all of that? For example, if there are multiple wives, or if there are other family
Mhm.
members involved as far as estates are concerned. When an estate wrapped up,
Liquidated.
yeah,
Yeah,
not necessarily liquidated, needs to be
wound
wrapped
up.
up after the death, wound up after the death. And there are other members of the family that are involved as beneficiaries in that estate.
Yes, I mean, you're asking us three different questions. Um, I do think in terms of the legislation, sorry, in terms of the interim relief, we need to acknowledge, although those submissions were made by the state, we countered that submissions by saying that there isn't a huge amount of Muslims in this country. I mean, we can talk about a million. So what are we talking about in terms of massive interest? We are talking here about equity, and we're talking about Muslim spouses to be able to use the court to be able to enforce um, rights that has been given to them in terms of Islam. For example, nafaka. In addition to that, the issue around children and custody or contact and care. And then when we talk about the registration of death, for example, we all know that um, our death certificates indicate that, or even if you were married for 50 years, that you are actually single, which has implications in terms of um, the dissolution of your estate, whether or not it's in terms of intestate or testate, or whether or not you are married, whether or not you have in a monogamous or polygamous marriage. And so the FTA, which the Constitutional Court confirmed, indicated that the state has to come up with regulations and processes and to be able to ensure that that does not happen. To be able to take into account that this may be a first, second, or even third wife, and to be able to take into account the rights of those particular children. So when we talk about the rights and the interests of children, we all know that in terms of civil marriages, um, the family advocate needs to do an assessment on the care and custody of the child. And this doesn't happen in our marriages. In how many talaqs are given even in a month, which means that there is always a massive issue around custody and care or contacting care, even and those assessments need to be done, which means that the court is now is the higher guardian of those children. And so these huge implications. We all know, that there are challenges around historically and the historic discrimination that follows Muslim women because of the fact that we are black, because of the fact that you live in South Africa, and so, and the issue that we have is that they um, the out of community property might be seen as a form of discrimination, but the issue is that 7.3 allows the court to make an equitable distribution. In addition to that, the forfeiture provisions in terms of the Divorce Act, in terms of the equitable division, etc., is also made available. Obviously, in terms of the processes, there's a lot of, which courts do we go to, etc., high courts or lower courts, etc. But I do think that access was very key, access to the court was very key to this case in terms of Section 34 of the Constitution, and many submissions were made. And I do think that the divorce proceedings can be brought within the lower court, subject to the provisions of the proceedings like this.
Okay, we do have time constraints, Seehaam, so I do want to touch on the other two issues very quickly regarding Sharia-compliant wills. Can these be contested in in the court, in the secular courts, and other members of the family being beneficiaries, brothers, parents, etc.? Again, what's the status there as far as they're concerned?
Well, I mean, that is a completely different question in terms which whether or not this particular
It's
case
not
can
covered.
be
So it's not covered in what we have on the table right now. Let's then leave it for another. Let's leave it for another interview.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what is relevant to this current judgment then.
Well, like I said, the one of the other provisions that we need to be able to look at in terms of the interim relief is the issue of retrospectivity, and which you obviously spoke about in terms of influx, and that the state made those submissions if it was going to be pulled back to 1994. However, the Constitutional Court um, ensured that it ended at the 15th of December 2014, which is a little bit broader than what the SCA provision was, which was at the time when the SCA order was given in 2021. So you can see it was done to the period when the legal proceedings have been initiated by the Women's Legal Center. And what is the implication? It means that where legal proceedings have not been finalized, where it's been instituted, when the talaq has not been gone through, etc., the remedy is available in respect of legal proceedings, and they will be able to go to court to be able to ensure that the equitable redress in the marriage.
Okay, we need to wrap up. So I've got 2 minutes left. Seehaam, just for the benefit of listeners who haven't been following this 14-year-long or even longer struggle by the Women's Legal Center and other parties, can you just give us a brief overview that talks directly at this situation, talks directly to this issue around the Muslim Marriage Act?
Yes. Well, the Constitutional Court has finally confirmed that the state has been arguing for over 20 years this issue around Muslim marriages, and Muslim women are, and the court confirmed that are being discriminated because of their religious beliefs and because they have been married in terms of their religion. They have been unable to access the relief and remedies as women which were married in terms of the Marriages Act and the Recognition of Customary Marriages Act. And in addition to that, the court has indicated that the Marriages Act is inconsistent with the Constitution, including the Divorce Act, as well as the common law definition is inconsistent, and that the state has to come and it's suspended for 24 months, which will allow the state to come and remedy the breach in whatever form. Doesn't mean which includes enacting legislation or amending existing legislation. There's also interim relief, which means that matters that has not been finalized at the 15 December 2014 can be brought before the court, and a divorce can be brought, or divorce can be instituted, and the Divorce Act will guide the proceedings, but the court will also ensure that it treats the marriages as if they were out of community of property. However, there is the provision of 7.3, which indicates or gives the courts discretionary powers around equitable redress.
Okay, my final question, we have to wrap up. Would I be correct in thinking that this does also protect a situation with multiple wives and their children?
It also, yes, where the spouse has been married to multiple wives, it also speaks to just an equitable manner of division, and the court will have to take that into account.
Okay, Seehaam, you and I need to have a very intense, long discussion. There's so much more to unpack regarding multiple wives, their children, and where wives have been supporting husbands in businesses and have made a meaningful contribution, etc., etc. So all of that has to be unpacked in a future program. We don't have time for it now, but we will set up that interview sometime soon, inshallah. You go well. Thank you very much, and many congratulations on this victory. Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.
8:45 exactly, in a minute or two, we'll be joined by Aisha Kaji regarding, she's a research fellow at Africa Asia Dialogues. We're going to be looking at the recall of the Sudanese ambassador from Ethiopia. So stand by.